This video shows you how to refit your Vanos. If you didn't replace the diaphragm springs or remove the hubs, just click the link to jump to the appropriate section of the video. Remove the locking ring from the exhaust camshaft, but leave the hub in place. Prepare to install the exhaust camshaft by oiling the bearings. Pause and read the slides so that you install the diaphragm springs correctly, especially if fitting new S62 springs. The number in the black rectangle refers to the drawing number in the table on the website. Click top right for more details. Fit the hub onto the camshaft and position the camshaft on the engine. Don't forget to loop the chain over the sprocket. And take care not to allow the diaphragm spring or shim to fall into the engine. Twist the camshaft so the lobes of number 1 cylinder are horizontal. This ensures that there is a minimum valve spring pressure on the camshaft. A camshaft compression tool should always be used when fitting or removing a camshaft, as it ensures that even pressure is applied to the shaft. The tool I made fits in a spark plug hole. As number 2 and number 4 valves are being opened by the camshaft, they are the best holes to choose. With the camshaft slightly raised, apply oil so it goes between the camshaft and the bearing cups. Evenly tighten the camshaft tool, ensuring that the camshaft sits properly in its bearing cups. Oil and fit the bearing caps. Screw on the nuts to approximately 5 Newton meters. Tighten the nuts to the correct torque. If you used a camshaft compression tool, remove it and refit the spark plugs. Some of the nuts were inaccessible with the tool in place. I had to finish torquing these nuts after I removed the tool. A is for Auspuff. Twist the camshaft so the camshaft locking tool is properly engaged. This section about setting up the exhaust sprocket is one of the most important sections in the video. Inevitably, the exhaust sprocket is going to be in the wrong initial position. This is where mine was when I fitted the camshaft. The bottom of the slot was approximately halfway between the teeth of the camshaft sensor gear when I turned the sprocket in the direction shown and tensioned the chain between the crank and the exhaust sprocket. The correct position for the slot should be approximately 1/4 of the way up the gap as shown. We adjust the slot position by turning the sprocket relative to the chain. We can only do this one tooth at a time and in a clockwise direction looking at the front of the engine, or anti-clockwise as seen on this video. Click the link to see how to move the sprocket one tooth at a time. This is the correct final position of the slot relative to the camshaft sensor teeth when the sprocket is turned in the direction shown. With the exhaust sprocket in the correct position, tension the chain and lock it against the inlet camshaft using an appropriate tool. And confirm the exhaust sprocket is still in the correct position. Push the exhaust sprocket backwards off the camshaft and lock it in place using a screwdriver or similar tool. Remove the original locking tool, but maintain the tension on the chain and fit the inlet sprocket. The correct position for the sprocket is with the bottom of one of the slots in line with the top of the intermediate head. Remove the locking screwdriver and pull the exhaust sprocket back onto the camshaft and confirm that its maximum deflection is as shown in the video. Install the inlet locking ring. Make sure that it is orientated properly as shown, with the hinge at the 1 o'clock position. Install the locking ring carefully, as it could fall into the engine. Hold it in place with an appropriate thin tool. Advance the inlet camshaft by about 10 degrees so that the cutout looks like this. Pause and read the slides so that you install the diaphragm springs correctly, especially if fitting new S62 springs. Fit the inlet hub onto the camshaft, taking great care not to drop the diaphragm shim or spring into the engine. Being careful not to drop them into the engine, screw 2 of the stainless steel screws into the inlet hub as shown. Finger tight and then back 1 full turn. Install the exhaust locking ring. Again, be careful not to drop it into the engine. As with the inlet, the hinge goes at the 1 o'clock position. Twist the hub so the tangs are horizontal and install 2 stainless steel screws from the rear of the sprocket. Again, finger tight, then back 1 full turn. Here's an image showing the screws in the rear of the sprocket. It's very important that the hubs are free to rotate, but that the screws aren't so loose that they will fall out. Before refitting the chain tensioner, you need to empty it of all the oil. You do this by pumping it twice. You will need to do this on a hard surface and be prepared to absorb the expelled oil. Install the centre section so the tangs go either side of the tensioner inside the engine. Using a new seal, screw the chain tensioner into place. Once fitted, you should still be able to remove the circled screw. E is for Einlass. Adjust the inlet camshaft so the camshaft tool is properly seated. A is for Auspuff. Adjust the exhaust camshaft so the camshaft tool is properly seated. Both camshafts should now be in the top dead centre position. Now for the final checks before fitting the Vanos. The crankshaft should be locked at top dead centre. Both camshafts should be locked at their top dead centre positions. Both hubs should be loose and fully rotated to the right. If you have just clicked to here because you didn't remove the hubs, all 12 hub screws should be loose but in place. And this should be the approximate position of the exhaust hub screws. This section about correctly setting the relative positions of the exhaust hub and pinion is probably the most critical section in the video. Remove the exhaust pinion from the Vanos. Starting with the hub fully twisted to the right, engage the pinion to the correct depth and note the position of the screws. The hub needs to turn by the amount shown so the screw heads are accessible. Mark the hub and mark the spline on the pinion. There's a gear fully withdrawn, so the hub's free to turn. That's it fully across to the right. It can't engage on the tooth to the right of the marked tooth. So as I turn the hub to the left, the marked tooth is the first tooth that engages. As it goes in, the hub continues to twist, and that's approximately how far in the hub goes when connected to the Vanos. And you can see the screws in the perfect position. Refit the exhaust pinion to the Vanos. We are now going to temporarily fit the Vanos. To make life easy for ourselves, remove the large O-rings. Make sure that both the pinions are fully retracted and that the hubs are fully turned to the right. Engage the Vanos. The exhaust pinion engages first, so make sure that the marks line up. Be aware that the tangs on the exhaust hub must engage the holes in the Vanos pump. Twist the inlet hub so that it engages with the first slot available. Push the Vanos fully home and confirm that the exhaust hub screws are accessible. Mark the inlet hub and the inlet pinion. Fit the large Vanos O-rings and the small O-ring. Use oil to keep the small O-ring in place whilst fitting the Vanos. Fit the Vanos. Align the exhaust and inlet markings. Push the Vanos home, twisting the hubs to the left as you do so. Engage the exhaust hub tangs with the holes on the Vanos pump. Using the two circled screws, push the Vanos fully home, making sure that the exhaust hub is engaged in the Vanos pump and the small O-ring hasn't been disturbed. Confirm that the screw at the back of the exhaust sprocket is fully accessible. Fit the screw shown finger tight. With the crankshaft locked, the camshaft locked, and the Vanos in position, we now torque up these two bolts and these two bolts. Just to explain what we've done there, it's important to understand it. This is a schematic of the links between the piston and the valve in the S50 engine. The interfaces in red are areas where there is play that can be removed by rotating the engine forward and taking out the backlash. The interface between the sprocket and the hub is a diaphragm spring. The diaphragm spring is used to absorb chatter and allows for a more progressive change of camshaft position when the Vanos advances and retards. The only way to ensure that the valve timing is correct is to make sure that there is no slip between the sprocket and the hub. We do this by compressing the diaphragm spring with the correct amount of force. If the crankshaft were turned before clamping the hub to the sprocket, the hub wouldn't move until the stainless steel bolts were pushed by the slot in the sprocket. This would mean the camshaft was out of position by several tens of degrees. We have just squeezed the hub against the sprocket with enough force to ensure that they hopefully move as one when we rotate the engine. Now we've done that, we can unlock the crankshaft, unlock the camshafts, and advance the engine by 240 degrees so that we can access the next pair of screws. Fit and torque to 10 Nm the next pair of screws on the inlet hub. And on the exhaust hub. Rotate the crankshaft by another 240 degrees to give access to the last pair of screws. Again, fit and correctly torque the inlet hub screws. And the exhaust hub screws. We are now going to check what we've done. Rotate the crank to top dead centre and lock it. Check the timing marks on the camshafts and confirm that you can lock the camshafts with the tool. If you had any problems aligning the camshafts, you may find the answer in this section. Fit the solenoid positioning tool. Unlock the camshafts. Apply 8 bar of compressed air. Fully advance the exhaust camshaft and then fully retard it. Fully advance the inlet camshaft and then fully retard it as well. Disconnect the air supply and purge the Vanos. To make sure the chain is properly tensioned, rotate the crank through 720 degrees and then lock it at top dead centre. Now recheck the camshafts. The maximum allowable gap under the tool is 0.5 mm. If the camshafts are not aligned, you should loosen all the hub screws, offset the camshaft by the appropriate amount, and then go through the process again until they pass the test. Disconnect the solenoid positioning tool. Now to finish off putting everything back together. Loosen the 2 Vanos securing screws and pull back the Vanos. Apply sealant to the Vanos bridge and allow it to set. Fit the bridge and engage the screws. Push the Vanos forward using the 2 securing screws. Tighten the bridge screws and remove any excess sealant. Attach the chain guard. Install the other Vanos securing screws. Take note of the screw that holds the earth wire. Remove the oil feed adapter. Make sure the pressure relief valve is tight. Attach and secure the oil feed pipe. Attach the solenoid connectors. Remove the crankshaft locking pin, the crankshaft turning tool, and the camshaft locking tool. Refit the cam cover. Refit the coil packs and their wiring. We are now going to get oil pressure in the engine without starting it. Check the oil level. Remove fuses 13 and 18. These are for the fuel pump. Reconnect the battery and crank the engine. Do not allow it to fire. Crank it over until the oil pressure light goes out. Reconnect the fuel pump fuses. The 5 amp fuse is number 13 and the 15 amp fuse is number 18. Start the engine. It will be lumpy to start with as the cams are not in the correct initial position. After about 10 seconds the engine will come on song. Bit of hesitation to start with. Obviously waiting for the Vanos pressure to get up. Now the Vanos has kicked in. Run it for no more than a minute. Because now that you know it's working, you want to check the valve clearances. Click on the link to see how to do that. Refit the solenoid connector cover, the fan and the cowlings, and any other items that you may have removed.